when we look around us, we find that life is very misleading. What seems to appear as happiness unfolds into waves of sorrow, and vice versa. What seems painful in the beginning gives us sorrow in the end. And yesterday we took a look at the importance of looking inward. Why is it so difficult to look inward? The Kathopanishad explains this in the 4th chapter, mantra 1.
Paranchikhani vyatrunat swayambhu tasmat parang pashyati nantaratman kashchid dhira pratyagatmanamaikshat avrutta chakshuramrutatvamichan.
The self-existent Lord, Swayambhu, created the senses with the defect of outward vision. No one has, not even a Mahatma, has senses that look inward. They all look outward. You can't see, hear, taste, smell things that are inside. You only contact objects outside with your sense organs. Therefore, tasmat, one perceives the external, not the inner self. Kashchit dhira, but a certain wise person, desirous of immortality, what does he do? Turns his eyes inward and then sees the inner self. So, avritta chakshu, why is he a wise person? Because he works against the trend and looks within. It's like working against the gravitational force. Do you know that a rocket, for it to go out into outer space, first needs to fight the gravitational pull. Once it's free, then it goes on. It's the same thing with us. This gravitational pull of the senses is something that requires courage. It requires the kashchit dhiraha. What a beautiful term he uses. Dhira is a hero, the bravest, the purest, the best among human beings is the one who has the capacity to look within. That rare person. Why does he look within? He looks within because amrutatvam ichham. He is desirous of immortality, is not content with the finite, the passing, the ephemeral. This quality only a human being has, and with this fantastic gift that we are endowed with, what are we doing? We're just running after the senses, getting entangled in cheap, trivial, petty matters, and you get ensnared in it in such a way that in the next verse he talks about what happens to a person who indulges in sense organs. That is the autobiography of each one of us. But before that, he turns his eye inward, avritta chakshu. Why? Because he's desirous of immortality. And then what does he find there? Pratyagatman aikshat. He sees the inner self. He reaches that state of infinite peace and bliss. And this inward journey, the spiritual journey, is unique. Because number one, it is inward. Because there are many, many obstacles in this path. Where are the obstacles? Inside us, not outside. But the prize is such that you go beyond delusion to moksha, to freedom. And that is a fantastic experience. What we need to understand is that every advancement, every little step you take inward pays a rich dividend in the external world. You know, the Americans use the term collateral damage. We use the term collateral benefit. The collateral benefit is that you gain the world, you achieve success in the world, you attain prosperity and happiness in the world, which you can never ever get by pursuing the world. Therefore, he says, kashchit dhiraha, a certain wise person. What happens when you indulge in the senses is what he says in the next mantra, mantra 2.
Para च कामाननुयन्ति बालाः ते मृत्योर्यन्ति विततस्य पाशम् अथ धीरामृतत्वं विदित्वा ध्रुवमध्रुवेष्विह न प्रार्थयन्ते.
Balaha, children, pursue external pleasures and fall into the widespread snare of death. But the dhiras, the wise ones, having known the eternal, the immortal, do not desire the non-eternal here. This is the difference. The difference is in the perception, in the knowledge, in the vision. You must have a larger vision. If you don't have, what happens to you? You get ensnared in death. What death? Not physical death. Physical death is not so bad. It's the spiritual death that is killing. And every one of us, all of us is going through this spiritual death. When? How? Over and over again. Yesterday we saw what happens to a person who doesn't follow the spiritual path in terms of health. But what happens in terms of the spiritual loss is something that you cannot put into words because it's subtle. You can't comprehend it. And you don't know what you're going through because you've got acclimatized to sorrow. How on earth are you going to get out of it? Therefore, Shankaracharya says, "Oh Murari, please save me, because there is no other way that I can get out of it." At least that we must have. At least that little bit of surrender that I'm in a mess, please help me. That also we don't have. The more ignorant we are, the more we believe, I know everything. This morning a lady came over and we were discussing. And she was saying, you talk to even a school girl. She was saying she was talking to her own daughter, who's all of 13 years old. But they speak as if they know everything in life. I know everything. You're a fool, Mom. That's how they talk. That's what they believe in. Completely ignorant people believe they know everything. And that's all of us are like that. How are we going to get out of it? So, now how do we begin? Any person is prepared to undertake a journey, however arduous the task may be, however hazardous it may be, however extreme the hardships you may have to tolerate, if you have the prize in mind, the goal, like people who, I'm sure you've seen in National Geographic and channels like that, about people who undertake this journey to Mount Everest. I mean, you and I don't even think of it, but there is that Kashchit Dhira in mountaineering who thinks of getting to Mount Everest. How does he start? He doesn't start straight away with Mount Everest. He starts here in the Western Ghats at 500 feet, 800 feet. That's how he begins. And then he prepares himself for that impossible journey in the face of death. Why? Because that prize, the goal, the mission is something that is so valuable to them. And it is the same way in the spiritual path. Only when you understand the prize, this great, wonderful journey within. Even if you don't get to the state of self-realization, the freedom from the thraldom of the senses is what you should aspire for, enjoy, and benefit from. This every one of us can. Not everyone can get realization. So what is it that you need to understand? That sensual life is always in the clutches of time and therefore is subject to change. And this is the death that we go through. So what is the way out? The way out is the use of the intellect, this extraordinary gift that we have, which not only coordinates the activities of the mind and senses, but has the capacity to visualize a higher goal, something beyond just me and myself. And then you raise yourself, that intellect helps you to raise yourself to the spiritual dimension. And that's what he's saying here. Once you get there, having known the eternal, you don't even have to get to the eternal. Having known the higher, you interpret it like that. Do not desire the non-eternal. You yourself have experienced that. From childhood to now, you have constantly grown to a higher vision, a higher state of fulfillment, and therefore developed this disinterest in the lower. How many of us here get excited with toys? However sophisticated the toys may be, however high-tech the toys may be, which were not available when we were children, still it doesn't move you even the slightest bit. Your needle just doesn't move even by 1 degree. Why? Because you have grown out of that state into the state of adulthood. Question is, when are you going to grow to the state of spiritual adulthood? So, life is misleading. Let's take a look briefly at our personality and how every aspect of our personality misleads us. The senses, they conceal more than they reveal. We believe that seeing is believing, There's a term, seeing is believing. But actually, that sight misleads us completely. How many of you have seen these optical illusions that people send by email? It is fantastic. How you see things that are really not there. How is it? The eyes mislead you. The ears mislead you. What can you hear? You can hear, the human ear can hear only a narrow range of sound. Even a dog can hear beyond us, right? What do whales hear? So, we really don't hear what is there in the world. We hear only what we want to hear. On top of that, the mind interferes with it and blocks out whatever you don't want to hear. The truth you don't want to hear, so you block it out. Imaginary things, whatever you want to believe in, only that you pick up from the world. So on and so forth. Then the mind. The mind projects this entire world. You believe that the world is real out there. It's not. It's your projection. Look at it from the relative. You pick a person you like, you project goodness onto that person, and you believe the person is good. Take another person. If you decide to dislike the person, from the very word go, you are seeing evil in that person. This is highlighted in the story in the Mahabharata, where Krishna calls both Yudhishthir and Duryodhana at different periods of time. Meaning at the same time, but separately. Calls Yudhishthir and says, Yudhishthir, I need a favor from you. So Yudhishthir says, of course, Krishna, I'll do anything for you. He says, I have a little bribe to be given to someone. I have a little nasty job to be done. And I need an ace crook. Will you find me one? Yudhishthir says, of course, Krishna, I'll do anything for you. 2 minutes later, he calls Duryodhana and tells Duryodhana, I need God's good man, a totally reliable, honest, fantastic person. Can you find me one? Duryodhana says, of course, Krishna, anything for you. Both Yudhishthir and Duryodhana go around the same world at the same time, the same people they contact. And they both go back to Krishna. Yudhishthir goes back so dejected because he is not able to fulfill Krishna's smallest wish. He says, Krishna, I'm terribly sorry. Krishna says, what happened? He says, you asked me to find one evil person. I can't find one evil person in the world. And Duryodhana comes and says, Krishna, wherever I look, ace crooks around. I looked all over Mumbai city. Mind you, I'm saying Mumbai, not Bombay. Otherwise, I have a gun to my head. Mumbai city. I can't find one Duryodhana says, I can't find one honest fellow. Each one is more of a crook than the other. Mumbai is a city of gangsters, he goes and says. Yudhishthir goes back to Krishna and says, the same place, the same people he has contact. What do we learn from this? When you point faults at people, when you find something wrong with people, it is not that they are evil. There is something terribly, terribly wrong with your perception, with the way you're looking at it. And what you should find, see, if the truth is out there, that everyone should feel the same way. Everyone doesn't feel the same way about the same person. Everyone doesn't feel the same way about the same world. And so therefore it has to be you. The mind projects the world. It distorts facts. This is what, and two tragic consequences. Shakespeare brings this out beautifully. Othello is married to one of the finest specimens of humanity painted by Shakespeare, Desdemona. But he suspects her of infidelity and murders her. Doesn't even bother to ask. That means he has no doubt in his mind. And this is how we go about life. We have no doubt in our minds whatsoever about the judgment that we pass, which is all completely, totally distorted. And by the time he came to know the truth, it was too late. He could not deal with it. He went and killed himself. And this is what we're doing. That's what it is. And then you believe it's real. No one in the world, if Krishna, Narayana, Swayam were to come and tell you that, look, what you're seeing is not there. It is not true. The person is not evil. You won't believe it. This is called tamasic intellect. Hang on to your wrong concepts. You will die, but you won't give up those wrong concepts. Intellect. It's completely clouded, biased, prejudiced. So what happens is, the likes and dislikes of the mind are so powerful, so strong. Why? Because from birth you have been functioning on likes and dislikes. There is no intellect. No one in the world tells you that there is a buddhi, there is an intellect with which you need to function. At least in India, some people know the existence of the intellect. There are people across the world who don't even know that they possess a thing called intellect. So when you talk about it, they say, oh, I didn't know there were two entities within me. That intellect, because of ignorance, because of not strengthening it, not reinforcing that intellect, gets completely, totally subjugated by the mind and held captive by the mind. So thereafter, the intellect can function, reasons only within the parameters of what the mind wants. There's a beautiful poem called The Pond, in which there's a little chicken that goes and sees a pond there and ducks swimming in that pond, and the poet describes it so beautifully. It's so attractive, so tempting. But the chicken remembers the mother had told it, never go venture into the water. But then he reasons. But he reasons within the parameters of what he likes. How do we know that? Because the watchword there is, I'm really remarkably fond of the water. That's what the chicken says.